7 out of 10. That is the failure rate when researchers at UC Davis pulled bottles labeled extra virgin olive oil off regular store shelves and ran them through actual lab certification, which means if you've been taking a spoonful before bed for your heart or your sleep or your joints, there is a real chance the bottle sitting in your kitchen right now contains fat with almost none of the compounds that actually do anything, and the label will not tell you. But here is what concerns me more than the bottle. It is what your body is doing between midnight and 6 in the morning, a maintenance window most people have never heard of, and how one ingredient, if the bottle is real, appears to change what happens inside 5 different systems during that window. I work in emergency medicine. I spend my nights watching the long-term consequences of habits arrive all at once. A blocked artery at 2 a.m., a blood sugar reading that has been climbing for a decade without anyone noticing. That vantage point teaches you which small daily choices actually matter. This habit is one of them, and it is widely misunderstood. Here is the reframe. This is not really about olive oil. It is about what your body does while you sleep. Your liver is running its hardest shift. Your blood vessels are trying to relax. Your muscles are trying to rebuild. Your brain is running a cleaning cycle it cannot run while you are awake. Most people think sleep is downtime. It is the most demanding maintenance cycle your body performs. And past 50, that cycle starts losing capacity. Tonight I am going to walk you through the 5 systems that a spoonful of real extra virgin olive oil appears to support during that overnight window, ranked from useful to the one that genuinely surprised me when I sat down with the research. Along the way, I am going to stop and tell you 2 things most videos skip entirely: how to know in 30 seconds whether your bottle can deliver any of this, and who should not do this at all, because this exact habit put a patient in my ER at 1 in the morning. Let us start with your heart. Here is something that surprises almost every patient I tell. Your cardiovascular risk peaks not during exercise or stress, but in the pre-dawn hours, roughly 3 to 6 a.m. That is when blood pressure climbs its steepest, when arterial walls are at their most rigid. A disproportionate number of cardiac events happen right in that window, or shortly after waking, not during a stressful meeting or a hard gym session, in the quiet, while you thought nothing was happening. After 60, arterial walls lose their flexibility. Think of a rubber band that has been sitting in a drawer for years. When it was new, you could stretch it easily, and it would snap right back. Leave it long enough and it becomes brittle, stiff, resistant. Your aging arteries behave exactly like that old rubber band. Each pulse of blood pressure pushes against walls that no longer give, and your heart has to pump harder against that resistance all night, every night. About 73% of olive oil is oleic acid, and that fat appears to reduce LDL oxidation, the process that turns cholesterol from a mostly harmless passenger into something that actually embeds itself in your artery wall and starts building plaque. Your liver does the majority of its cholesterol regulation between midnight and 3 in the morning. A spoonful of real olive oil before bed gives your liver the raw materials before its busiest shift, instead of making it search for them at 2 a.m. with nothing on the shelf. The Predeemed trial, one of the largest randomized nutrition trials ever conducted, found that a Mediterranean-style diet built around extra virgin olive oil as the primary fat led to roughly a 30% reduction in major cardiovascular events. That was large enough that the American Heart Association now lists this eating pattern among those best aligned with cardiovascular health. But I have to be honest, Predeemed tested a daily dietary pattern over years, not a single bedtime spoonful. The ingredient works. The consistency matters more than the clock. We will come back to exactly why that distinction changes what you should do. One thing I need to say clearly here. If you take a statin, a blood pressure pill, metformin, or any anticoagulant, run this habit past your doctor or your pharmacist before you start. Olive oil works alongside those medications, not instead of them. The moment anyone tells you a tablespoon of anything replaces a prescription, that person is not your doctor, and they are not looking out for you. That is the heart. Now here is the system that quietly shapes the next 2 decades for more people in this audience than almost any other factor on the list: your blood sugar. Federal health data puts the number of American adults with prediabetes at close to 100 million. 80% of them do not know. And the clearest warning sign is not a number during the day. It is what happens at 4 in the morning while you are still asleep. Here is the mechanism. Your liver, trying to be helpful, dumps a load of stored glucose into your bloodstream to fuel waking up. Healthy insulin system? The surge gets caught. Insulin resistance? It floods in unchecked every morning. This is called the dawn phenomenon. Over years, that repeated spike is what pushes a quiet borderline reading across the line into a full diagnosis. Silently, predictably. Olive oil addresses this on 2 separate fronts. First, it slows how fast your stomach empties, meaning whatever you ate at dinner trickles into your intestine instead of arriving in one wave. Second, oleic acid appears to restore some of the sensitivity your cells have lost to insulin signal. Imagine a thermostat that stopped responding to the temperature dial. It still works, it just needs a stronger nudge each time. Oleic acid seems to recalibrate that dial, slightly, so the same amount of insulin does a little more work. If it has been a while since anyone checked your fasting glucose, or A1C, put that on your list for your next appointment. For anyone on Medicare, there is a free preventive visit designed exactly for this kind of screening, and very few people take advantage of it. 2 numbers, 1 blood draw, and you will know where you stand. That is number 2. Now here is the one I would want every person over 60 watching this to hear, because it is the benefit almost nobody talks about, and in my experience, it is the one that decides whether you stay in your own home or not. Muscle. Sarcopenia. That is the medical term for age-related muscle loss, and the numbers should genuinely concern you. Starting around 60, the average adult who is not doing resistance training loses somewhere between 1 and 2% of their total muscle every 12 months. Run that math forward to 75, and 1/3 of the muscle you had at 50 is simply no longer there. With it goes balance, metabolic rate, and a large part of what lets you live on your own terms. Here is the mechanism underneath, and this is where it gets interesting. Your muscles rebuild through a process regulated by a hormone called IGF-1 and checked by a protein called myostatin. Think of IGF-1 as the gas pedal on a construction crew and myostatin as the brake. At 30, the pedal responds instantly. The brake stays loose. By 70, the pedal is sluggish and the brake has tightened. Same stake, same walk. Your muscles barely respond. That gap has a name: anabolic resistance. And here is where olive oil earns its place on this list. Researchers have found that oleuropein, one of the key polyphenols in olive oil, appears to support calcium transport into muscle cell mitochondria, the part of each cell that produces energy. As you age, that transport slows down. Less calcium in, less energy out. Your muscles literally produce less power per contraction. Oleuropein appears to keep that pathway from closing. A recent review in Nutrients confirmed that EVOO supplementation shows genuine promise for delaying muscle wasting through its effects on the signaling pathways that control protein synthesis. That is not theoretical, that is mechanical. There is a patient who stayed with me. Margaret, 68, a retired school teacher outside Knoxville. She did not come to the ER for a fall. She came because she could not get out of her bathtub without calling her daughter, and she was too embarrassed to tell anyone it had been happening for months. There is a deceptively simple assessment, originally developed by a Brazilian cardiologist, that measures exactly this kind of decline. You stand in the middle of a room, lower yourself to a seated position on the floor, and then rise again without leaning on anything for support. Your score on that one movement correlates more tightly with 10-year survival than most lab work people pay hundreds of dollars for. Margaret scored 0 that day, so we started small. A tablespoon of real olive oil paired with a slow-digesting protein before bed, something like cottage cheese or a couple of boiled eggs, because casein and similar proteins keep delivering amino acids to your muscles through the early morning hours when growth hormone is at its highest. Add to that 2 sessions a week of resistance work, nothing extreme, resistance bands, and her own body weight. 5 months later, she lowered herself to the floor in my office, paused, and stood back up. Not cleanly. One palm touched down for a second. She told me afterward that what mattered was not the test. It was that she took a bath on a Tuesday afternoon without planning it around anyone else's schedule. That is not a lab value. That is independence. And if you are watching this, and you know someone whose world is quietly getting smaller because they are losing strength they do not think they can get back, this might be the most important section in this entire video for them. Now let me stop the countdown, because everything I have described so far, every benefit, rides on one thing most people get wrong: the bottle. In 2010, researchers at UC Davis bought olive oil off regular store shelves, imported and domestic, and ran it through real certification testing. 69% of the imported bottles failed. For California-produced oils, 1 in 10. Not necessarily counterfeit. The failures happened because heat exposure, fluorescent lighting, and months on a warehouse shelf had broken down the polyphenols before the bottle ever reached a shopping cart. The oil inside was technically olive oil. The label was technically accurate, but the compounds responsible for every benefit I have described tonight were largely gone. You would be swallowing 120 calories of fat each evening with almost nothing biologically active left in it. Here are 4 checks. None of them add more than half a minute to your grocery trip. First, the container matters. You want dark glass or a tin can. A clear bottle sitting under store lights is losing active compounds every hour it sits there. Plastic is worse. If you can see the oil clearly through the packaging, pass. 2. Look for a harvest date, not just a best buy date. You want oil from the most recent harvest, ideally within the past 12 to 18 months. No harvest date, small red flag. 3. Taste it, straight, off a spoon. Real extra virgin olive oil tastes faintly bitter and grassy, and then a second later, a sharp, peppery catch at the back of your throat. That catch is oleocanthal. No sting, no benefit. That is the single fastest test you have. 4. California Verified or North American Olive Oil Association seal. Domestic oils failed at 1 in 10. Imported oils failed at 7 in 10. A genuinely fresh-pressed liter typically runs $15 to $25. If the price looks too good, ask yourself how that math works. Now, before I give you the last 2 systems, here is who needs to pause. Donald, 64, a retired electrician outside Albuquerque. He started taking a tablespoon most nights after hearing about it from a neighbor. 3 weeks in, he woke at midnight with pain under his right ribs that felt like a belt being tightened. He came in white-faced, sure it was cardiac. It was his gallbladder. He had had silent gallstones for years and never known. Here is why. When fat hits your small intestine, a hormone called cholecystokinin tells your gallbladder to squeeze and release bile. Healthy gallbladder, routine. But a gallbladder with stones sitting quietly inside it, that squeeze can jam a stone into the duct. That is the moment a silent condition becomes an ER visit. Gallstones affect somewhere between 1 in 10 and 1 in 6 American adults, and the majority never know until something like this happens. So talk to your doctor first if you have known gallstones or gallbladder disease, a history of pancreatitis, rapid recent weight loss, or any discomfort under the right ribs after fatty meals. Also, fat relaxes the valve that keeps stomach acid down. If you have reflux or GERD, take the oil 30 to 45 minutes before you lie flat, not right before bed. That same timing protects the joint repair window and your sleep. Here is how to think about it. If you get a mild ache under your ribs after rich food, and it fades on its own, log it, date, and time. If it keeps happening in a predictable, low-level way, bring the log to your next scheduled appointment. Pain that is more than mild, lasts hours, or comes with fever or yellowing of the skin. Urgent care, same day. Pain that is severe, unrelenting, or genuinely frightening. Go to the ER, and always, chest pain or pressure, sudden shortness of breath, or any stroke sign, face drooping, arm weakness, slurred speech, call 911. Do not drive yourself. I am not telling you to avoid olive oil. The overwhelming majority of people who do not have gallbladder problems or serious reflux can do this safely and benefit from it. This caution section exists because the small number of people it does affect should learn about it from a video, not from an ambulance ride. Now, the last two systems, your joints and your brain. I am pairing them because they share one critical dependency: deep sleep. Joints first. Oleocanthal, the compound behind that peppery sting, inhibits the same COX-1 and COX-2 enzymes that ibuprofen targets. A study published in Nature confirmed this in 2005. It has held up. A tablespoon is not a dose of ibuprofen, gentler. More like turning a dial down 2 notches than switching off the machine. But here is the part most people miss. Oleocanthal also dampens interleukin-1 beta, the signaling protein that orders your body to break cartilage down. Quiet that signal nightly, and you are not just easing morning stiffness. You may be slowing the structural damage underneath it. Different mechanism, different outcome. If you wake up stiff and stiff is getting worse year over year, that distinction matters enormously. Your brain. This is where it gets genuinely interesting. In 2012, a research team at the University of Rochester identified the glymphatic system, essentially your brain's overnight janitorial crew. During deep sleep, brain cells physically shrink. Cerebrospinal fluid rushes through the gaps. Metabolic waste, including beta amyloid, gets flushed out. A 2025 paper, in Cell, pinpointed the driver. Norepinephrine-mediated slow vasomotion during sleep actively powers that clearance. Without enough deep sleep, beta amyloid piles up, night after night, year after year, silently. The Alzheimer's Association puts the current number at roughly 7 million Americans over 65 living with Alzheimer's, and the disease process itself starts building 10 to 20 years before the first obvious symptom. I have to be careful here. There is real research suggesting olive oil polyphenols may protect against oxidative stress in brain tissue. But there is no large human trial proving a nightly spoonful directly reduces Alzheimer's risk. I am not going to tell you it does. What I can tell you honestly is this. The strongest lever you have for supporting that overnight cleaning system is deep sleep itself. Olive oil's anti-inflammatory and blood sugar stabilizing effects appear to support the conditions your brain needs to reach and stay in deep sleep. It is clearing the road so the ambulance can get through. That is still worth something. It is just not the same claim as olive oil prevents dementia. Here is the belief I want to leave you with, because it changes how strict you need to be about any of this. Most people assume this only works if you catch a precise window, like medication. Pre-dimmed and every other major trial tested a pattern repeated most days. For years. Polyphenols work the way compound interest works. A single contribution is invisible, but the same small contribution, repeated most nights over several months, changes the baseline your doctor actually measures. That is the entire rule. The oil has to be genuine. The habit has to be regular. The exact minute does not matter. 7:45 tonight, 8:30 tomorrow, that is fine. What actually erases the benefit is stopping entirely because you convinced yourself you missed a magic window. Show up imperfectly. Keep showing up. That is what compounds. Let me bring this together, because I do not want you walking away with 5 disconnected facts. If you remember one thing from everything I have said tonight, remember this framework. 4 words: genuine, regular, upright, aware. Genuine means dark bottle, harvest date printed, throat burn when you taste it plain. Regular means most evenings, not perfect evenings. Upright means stay vertical for half an hour after the spoonful, so you protect your reflux and give the joint compounds time to circulate. Aware means if you have gallbladder issues, acid reflux, or medications you have not run past your doctor, that conversation happens first. Try this for 14 days. Each morning, before your feet touch the floor, give yourself a quick score on 3 things: sleep quality, joint stiffness, and the number of times you woke overnight. Keep a running note on your phone or a sticky note on the nightstand. On day 1 and day 14, try the floor-to-standing test I described earlier. You are tracking direction, not perfection. 2 weeks is enough to see whether the needle is moving. None of this requires you to overhaul your life. It requires 1 dark bottle with a harvest date on it and 30 seconds a night. That is the whole ask. Here is your homework for tonight. Walk to your kitchen. Open the bottle you have been using. Take a 1/4 teaspoon straight. Wait 3 seconds. If there is no peppery burn at the back of your throat, that bottle is not delivering what you think it is, and replacing it is the single highest return change you can make. And if there is someone in your family, maybe a parent or a neighbor, who started this habit with whatever brand happened to be on sale, the label section of this video could save them a year of wasted effort. Forward it to them. Take care of yourself. Check the bottle. I will see you in the next one. Everything in this video is educational, not a prescription. If you have gallbladder issues, chronic reflux, or take daily medication, bring this up with your own physician before starting. A 2-minute conversation with someone who knows your chart is worth more than any video, including this one.